Hello and welcome to FO Talks, brought to you by Fair Observer, a platform for citizen journalism with over 2,500 contributors from over 90 different countries. And we would love you to join the conversation, so please do post your questions here on Zoom or on Facebook. My name is Claire Price and I'll be your host and moderator. Today we're joined by Ram Madhav, who's the former General Secretary of India's ruling BJP party. He's arguably the most influential political thinker in India, the ideas man at the heart of the BJP. As I mentioned, we'll start with your book. It's called Because India Comes First, and it's a collection of essays that were written between 2008 and 2020. Just if you can tell us in 1 minute what this collection of essays is about.
Oh, thank you. This collection of essays was largely about some of the important decisions taken by our government in the last 5-6 years. What I tried to highlight was the thrust of all these decisions was national interest, not necessarily the party, political, electoral interest. We as a party and as an ideological movement have always held the nation to be supreme, national interest to be supreme, not our party interest, not our any other interest. In certain situations, we faced even perceptional challenges. Yet we went ahead and took decisions because we believe that those decisions were in the interest of India. Rashtriya Swayamsevak is what we call in India. That's why I called the book, the title was given as Because India Comes First. So it actually talks about many important decisions that the government took in the last 6 years.
Can we just ask, why did you write those essays at the time and why publish it now?
Look, those essays were written as and when certain important decisions were taken. For example, there were articles about why the government, why Prime Minister Modi came to power, what prompted Indians to elect him in 2014 in the first place. From there to the most significant decision in 2019 of the abrogation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. As and when such decisions were taken, have penned my thoughts in the form of different essays. Those essays have been compiled and published in the form of a book by Amazon in late 2020. But those articles were written at the time of those decisions only.
So really an insider's insight, if you like, as to what drove those policies. Could you call this the sort of unofficial manifesto of the BJP?
No, rather than calling it as an unofficial manifesto or whatever, it is a sort of a report card of our work. What have we done in the last 5-6 years? Why have we done that? And how did we do those things? What was the thinking behind those decisions? It was a sort of a report card, you can call it, to place before the people of the country and of course people of the world at large.
Now, since leaving the role of General Secretary in September last year, are you now the BJP's ideas man? What's your role? How do you see it now?
Look, BJP is a party with an internal democratic structure, which allows for new committees and new leaders to take over after a fixed period. Every office bearer has a fixed tenure. 3 years is the tenure. I completed 6 years as the General Secretary of the party. Together with me, several others also have completed 6 years. After completion of 6 years, normally we will be relieved of our responsibility and a new set of leaders will be given those responsibilities. That is what has happened 3 months ago. I am still awaiting my new assignment in the party.
I see. Okay. Now, if we look at you and your background, you were loaned from the RSS to the BJP. Can we ask you which organization do you feel most strongly associated to?
No, you see, I am essentially an RSS functionary. You used the right word that I have been loaned to BJP in 2014 to work for the BJP's party organization. we are supposed to work only for the organization, not to aspire for any political positions in the government. So I have worked for 6 years. I was a senior functionary of the RSS when I was working in the RSS, and party gave me a very important position in 2014 as its general secretary, national level, and I have been assigned very important portfolio of Jammu and Kashmir and also the northeastern states, 8 northeastern states of India. I have performed my task. I was happy in RSS. I was happy in the BJP. So whatever role was assigned to me, I tried to perform to the best of my ability, and I'm awaiting my new role.
Okay, if we can ask you a few questions about the RSS, clearly it's been criticised a fair amount in the sort of Western media, if we can say. But actually, if despite it being looked at as a socially conservative force, it was one of the first major political organisations in India to call for the decriminalization of homosexuality. Can we just ask you what drove that policy decision?
Uh, Pardon me, I could not get you fully. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. So the RSS was one of the first major political organisations to call for the decriminalisation of homosexuality. How did that stand come about?
See, RSS, contrary to perception in some circles, is a very open-minded organization. It has always welcomed new and contemporary ideas. It has kept itself open to new thoughts, and it has always updated itself with the changing times and situations. When this question became important in Indian political discourse, especially this question about homosexuality, the one thing that struck many in the RSS leadership was that while the debate over its acceptability in a conservative social structure will continue, whether you should allow it or not allow it, it's a debate that society will continue to have. But the criminalization part of it, which used to be there in Indian criminal law, section 377 is what it used to be called. It used to criminalize the habit or the practice of homosexuality. In 2009, when I was the spokesperson of the RSS has decided to take this stand that pending the debate about its morality aspect, etc., let the society continue to debate, but at least we should decriminalize it and find ways of addressing. If it is seen as problem by anybody, let them address it by finding societal mechanisms. So that was when the RSS took that stand for the first time in 2009, and subsequently it was repeated on a couple of occasions.
Can we ask you, as someone who was there at the heart of all that, what was the internal debate like at the time?
RSS basically is a reflection of the ordinary Indian society. RSS is a grassroots organization. It has a wide, not formal membership, but informal membership of more than 6 million members across the country, and that involves the families of those members. And also the discourse within the RSS will be like the discourse within the ordinary Indian society. There will be many who look at it as something not acceptable in a conservative milieu, in a conservative setting. There will be some who would probably find that, okay, let us have a slightly different view. All these views have been reflected in internal discourse in the RSS also. RSS, that is a very democratic organization. We take decisions after a lot of discussion. So on all these issues like Section 377, etc., a lot of discussion happened. Finally, this view was taken that the criminalization part probably need to be reviewed, and we articulated it. And finally, India's apex court also has asked the government to have a relook at it. So the criminalization part has been now annulled.
Okay, let's go on to some other issues which are perhaps more at the heart of the RSS and the BJP. So clearly those core issues are the construction of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya, the abrogation of Jammu and Kashmir, and also this Uniform Civil Code. Two of the three have been acted upon already, but what's happening to this this third policy? Is that going?
In your question, you have talked about the two issues that have been already addressed. But if you look at the way those two issues have been addressed, both have been addressed through legal or judicial means only, not through any other mechanism. The Ram Janmabhoomi, Ram Temple issue was resolved through the judicial process, culminating in a judgment delivered by the Apex Court of India. We all respected the view of the judgment of the Supreme Court. Similarly, on the issue of Article 370, we followed a parliamentary route, which is subject to judicial scrutiny again. The matter is before the Supreme Court, but we took the parliamentary route. So we are committed to the constitutional methods available to people of India in resolving or addressing all these issues. Yes, Uniform Civil Code is another important issue that the RSS and wider family of organizations has always called for. But I must tell you, not just the RSS, but even the India Supreme Court has at least 3 times asked the government of the day to bring a uniform civil code for the entire country. But again, whenever any such thing has to happen in India, it will happen through a proper parliamentary route or through a proper judicial process.
Okay, so if we're looking at this Uniform Civil Code, which you say will be brought through a parliamentary process, do you think that will be accepted by India's minorities?
Pending the full promulgation of a uniform civil code, Prime Minister Modi's government has attempted one major reform, that is abrogation of the practice of triple talaq. Now, triple talaq earlier was one of the important aspects of the Muslim personal law in India. One of the 5 pending issues was divorce. So in that, a major reform was effected through Parliament, supported by almost all the important parties in the Parliament. More importantly, the women in India, both, of course, the Muslim women, but in general, women across the religious spectrum, have welcomed it and said that it is a much needed, much delayed action for the empowerment of women. So that major reform to the personal law has been effected in a very smooth manner without any difficulty or any controversy in India. Some fundamentalist groups have raised some objections, but larger Muslim society also has welcomed it. That gives me a confidence that in a gradual process, we can address the other remaining issues of personal laws also.
Despite what you said about those reforms, as you know, there is a very strained relationship between the BJP and RSS and liberal intellectuals worldwide. What do you think accounts for that strained relationship?
I don't know what do you mean by strained relationship. As I mentioned, as far as the Uniform Civil Code is concerned, number one, the directive principles of our Indian Constitution mention about it. Article 44 of the Indian Constitution mandates the government to promulgate a uniform civil code for the entire country at some point in time. In the last 70 years, we could not do that. In between, at least thrice, the Supreme Court of India had asked government of India to take a firm view on that, because you must remember, personal laws do not affect only the religion to which they belong. They affect everybody.
Sure.
They affect across the board. So nobody can say that it is my personal law. So that's why the Supreme Court has said that please introduce a uniform code for the whole country.
I think it's perhaps not just this uniform code, but it's other matters like the Citizenship Amendment Act. Clearly here in the West, there have been headlines like, is India flirting with fascism? I think Al Jazeera asked, is India turning into an authoritarian Hindu nationalist state? These are the sort of strains I'm talking about.
sorry. See, as far as issues like Citizenship Amendment Act, etc., are concerned, there is a large amount of either misunderstanding about the acts or deliberate misinformation that is being spread by some interested sections. Why I am saying this is Citizenship Amendment Act, number one, is only a small amendment to existing Citizenship Act of India. In India, anybody can claim citizenship. There are certain rules they have to complete. They have to be domiciled in India for 12 years. What Citizenship Amendment Act says is a particular group of refugees who came into India after 1947-50 partition of India and after the creation of Bangladesh in 1971-72, a large number of refugees came into India. Only those refugees can use a fast tracking provision. For them, it's not 12 years, it is 7 years. In 7 years, they can claim citizenship. Nothing else has changed. In fact, our own government has granted citizenship to several Muslims from Pakistan. A famous singer by name Adnan Sami was granted citizenship by Prime Minister Modi's government in 2017. So anybody, irrespective of his religion, can claim citizenship. But this was only with respect to certain refugee groups which came into India. And remember, most importantly, it's not prospective. Those who came before 2014 only are eligible for it. Somebody who comes in 2015, even if he is a Hindu, hardcore Hindu, Janavsari Hindu, he is not qualified to claim the benefit. So the propaganda about it is unfortunately very mischievous or misinformed.
Sure, we won't focus too much on that. I know you've been quizzed an awful lot by Western media about that. So just one last question about the BJP before we then move on to Jammu and Kashmir and other matters. Prime Minister Vajpayee, who led a BJP cabinet in the past, was known to cultivate intellectual leaders like Arun Shuri, Yashwant Sinha and Jaswant Singh. In the post-2014 era, they all turned dissidents. Is this an extension of liberal intelligentsia versus the Sangh bureaucracy?
No, those who become dissidents, they don't automatically become liberals. when they were in BJP, they were not liberal. When they become dissidents, they become liberal. I don't think that should be the criteria for anybody to be called a liberal or a conservative. They disagreed with certain aspects of our government or our decisions. Fair enough, in political system in India, there is that kind of freedom. It shows the vibrancy of our democratic process. It happens with all the parties. Don't you see such things happening with our principal opposition party? Those things happen in that party also. We are sorry that we lost some of our very good leaders, like intellectual giants like Mr. Arun Shuri, etc., because they probably could not agree with some of the positions. Fair enough, it's a democracy.
Okay, fabulous. Right, let's move on then, if we can. So you wrote in your book that the 5th of August 2019 will go down in history as a glorious day, you said. A historic blunder committed 70 years ago has finally been abrogated. So let's just ask about that. Why did the BJP revoke Article 370? What's your thinking behind that?
Well, let me tell you something interesting. Everybody in our political dispensation, even the leaders of the Congress party, right at the beginning of the independence itself, had wanted this article to go. Not many people know about it. The Congress Working Committee had unanimously opposed Article 370. I'm talking about 1950, when the article was made a part of the Constitution. Then the then leadership had told them that no, we agree with you, it should not be there, no discrimination between one state and the other, but let us give it temporarily for a few years. That's why it came under the section called the temporary provisions of the Constitution. It was supposed to be temporary. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, had on record told the Indian Parliament in 1963 that yes, it should go, but it will go on its own. It will erode and corrode by itself. That was his answer. So everybody knew that this article was creating a barrier between people and people in the same country. It should go. nobody probably had the courage to take that final step of removing it. Our government, because it is having the courage of conviction, it has done away with that article, leading to actually breaking the barriers between the people of Jammu and Kashmir and rest of the country. Now we all enjoy equal rights, similar rights, and people of Jammu and Kashmir are looking forward to better days in their lives.
Okay, we actually had a question here which you might enjoy answering. This one is really about whether you fulfilled the vision of Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, who's the founder of the party preceding the BJP, who died in a Kashmiri prison protesting Article 370. Do you feel you fulfilled his vision?
Oh, definitely. Definitely, it's a tribute to the martyrdom of Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee. I would like to use a very important phrase here. Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee was the first martyr in a divided India for the cause of undivided India.
Okay.
Partitioned India should not be partitioned again. For that great cause, Dr. Shama Prasad Mukherjee had martyred, and it is our tribute to him.
Taking it one step further, what's your view on Pakistan occupied Kashmir? Should India retake it?
There was a parliament resolution of 1994 in the Indian parliament. Remember, in 1994, it was a Congress government led by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. That government had moved a resolution in the Indian parliament stating that there is only one outstanding issue to be resolved between India and Pakistan. That outstanding issue is the status of the Pak occupied Kashmir. Legally, constitutionally, that territory belongs to India. It is under illegal occupation since 1948. There is a consensus or unanimous resolve of the Indian Parliament that that part should return to India. But how it will happen, how it will finally be fulfilled, is something probably the posterity will answer.
Saying that it should be part of India again, is that tantamount to declaring war? I mean, it seems quite radical to Western ears.
Not really. We are not saying that we will take it back through force or aggression or war. We are not saying that. We are only saying that legally that part belongs to India. It is under illegal occupation. The matter is also before the United Nations. There are ways of resolving these issues, such disputes. Not just India and Pakistan face, many countries face such disputes. So there is always a possibility that if not in our time, at a future point in history, those issues would be resolved to the satisfaction of both the parties. As far as we are concerned, we continue to insist that the Pak occupied Kashmir, which is an integral part of India, is under the illegal occupation of Pakistan.
If we look at the actual situation on the ground in some of those areas, particularly in Kashmir, clearly there have been internet blackouts, there's been sort of military police walking the streets. Why is it necessary to enact such measures?
Look, Kashmir has been facing a problem of cross-border terrorism for last more than 3 decades. It became a serious problem of terrorism sometime in late 1980s, in the last century. That problem persists. There are a number of terror groups which have their bases across the line of control in the area which you also described as Pak occupied Kashmir. They have their bases from where they push certain fidayeen, certain terrorists into Kashmir. Those terrorists undertake number of violent terrorist activities in the Kashmir Valley. We have been facing this problem for last 3 decades. To 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 tackle the challenge which emanates from Pakistan, the security forces presence is definitely higher in Kashmir. It is not meant for people of Kashmir, but it is meant to protect people of Kashmir from the acts of terror that are perpetrated by forces coming from our neighborhood.
So
For
is that
that
the
reason, we have certain
justification?
security programs there.
Is that also your justification for incarcerating the former premiers of Kashmir, Mahbooba Mufti and Omar Abdullah? What's your reason for that?
See, look, I am also a politician. When certain big decisions are taken by governments, sometimes keeping the law and order situation, I mean public peace situation in mind, political leaders are subjected to what we call in our constitution as preventive detention. It is not actually about putting them to any hardships or anything. They are detained preventively for a duration, for a fixed duration. It's not going to be years on. Similarly, several leaders who were detained when we took that major decision of abrogation of Article 370, they were only detained in a very temporary way under the laws called the preventive detention laws. Every political party faces it. I myself faced it in some situations. But okay, I faced it for one day. Somebody else like Mehbooba Mufti had to face it for 8 months, 9 months. But ultimately, they all have been set free. Today, all political leaders are free in Kashmir Valley and they are actively participating in electoral processes. We recently concluded district development council elections in which Mehbooba Mufti's party has actively campaigned. She herself has campaigned. Every leader is free in Kashmir today.
Okay, you mentioned in your last answer the line of control. Can we ask, in your view, is that likely to hold? And further on, is that likely to become the international border between India and Pakistan?
You mean line of control becoming international border right now? No. As I mentioned to you, there is a unanimous resolution of the Indian Parliament, which we all respect as the Solomon consensus of the entire country of India, which mentions that the entire area of Pak occupied Kashmir legally and constitutionally belongs to India. So that position remains. Hence, any change in status of LOC into any other thing is right now not tenable.
Okay, I think we'll move on to China. Thank you very much for that thorny issue of Jammu and Kashmir. China. So last year we saw clashes on the border between India and China. Lives were lost. Is conflict between India and China inevitable?
Look, we have a major border dispute. That dispute is something that we have been trying to manage through a peaceful negotiations process. If you see the record of the conflicts on the LOC with Pakistan, because India has a border dispute with Pakistan also, and the dispute with China along what we describe as LAC, line of actual control, you will realize that conflict on the LAC is comparatively much less than the conflict on LOC. That means we are able to manage this conflict with China in a better way. We would like to see it happen that way. After all, I know that border disputes between countries take a very long time to resolve. But we are hopeful that if we can succeed in managing peace along the LAC, we would be able to resolve that dispute at a later time. But you must also remember that while we have a border issue, we had a standoff last 7 8 months. We had a standoff between Indian Army and the Chinese Army across the LAC. The trade between the two countries remained the highest in the entire world. I mean, India's trade is highest with China and second highest with America. It also shows that we don't hold any animosity with China as a people, as a nation. We have a border issue. Let us acknowledge it. Let us try to resolve it, but let us try also to ensure the border remains incident-free, violence-free, and peaceful. That is the effort of that has been the effort of India right from the beginning.
Clearly, with the trade being so important, you might not want to upset such a big neighbour. But if we can ask you a fairly simplistic question, Who does India consider the greatest threat? The greater threat, is it Pakistan or is it China?
Look, we don't want any of our neighbors to be threats to us. We want to have good, friendly relations with all our neighbors. What we definitely want to avoid is that while competition is inevitable, especially for countries like India and China, which are rising very fast. They are rising as economic powers. There is competition inherent in their rise. This competition should be managed at the levels which cross that conflict line. They should remain below the conflict, then nobody is threat to anybody. If only they cross over and become some sort of a conflict, then there will be questions about threats from each other. As far as India is concerned, India is committed to rising as a peaceful power. That's why, even if you recall the Quad summit that took place a few days ago, in that, India has insisted on adding the word inclusive. We need a peaceful neighborhood. We need a free neighborhood. We also need an inclusive neighborhood. Everybody should come together. We should not see each other as threats. Rather, we should see each other as complementary to the rise of all of us. Let China rise, but let it rise peacefully. India wants to rise peacefully. That is India's approach. So we don't bracket anybody as our enemy or threat on a permanent basis.
Let's look at the economy, though. Are there efforts that you're aware of in terms of decoupling the Indian economy from the Chinese one, so it isn't so dependent on its big neighbor?
Look, India is now focusing on building its own grassroots economic power. India has to now strengthen its grassroots economy so that it stands on its own feet. Once that is possible, then we will be happy to engage with any country, including China, including many developed countries in the West, in Europe and in the West. So the current focus of the Prime Minister of India is what he calls as Atmanirbhar Bharat. Atmanirbhar Bharat means a self-reliant India. It's not about shutting up India from all sides. Some people misinterpret it as though a protectionist type of economy. No, India wants to make its grassroots economy stronger. For that, if we get help from China or America, we would welcome that. But the objective is that India, as economy, should stand on its own feet. Once you are strong at the grassroots as an economy, then you expand globally, you interact with the rest of the world, become an integral part of the supply chains in the world. So that is the outlook now. For that, we are now talking about, or we are now trying to implement Atmanirbhar Bharat based policies in India, self-reliant India as the objective of our economy.
In terms of reaching out, obviously India did join Japan, Australia and the US in the Quad, what's known as the Quad. Is that an attempt to counter the economic sort of power base, if you like, of China?
Look, as far as economic power of different countries is concerned, various kinds of multilateral and minilateral arrangements take place purely for economic purposes. US has had its own economic alliances. China has had its own economic alliances. Now a new minilateral is taking shape in the Indo-Pacific region, which is called the Quad. Quad, first of all, is not a military alliance. India has so far never entered in any military alliance. As far as I know, India doesn't have any idea of joining in any military alliance. But Quad is definitely an important economic powerhouse in Indo-Pacific region. These four countries coming together will benefit the entire region, because out of these four countries, at least three are very big economies: US, Japan, and India. And Australia is also a strong economy. So our coming together is for the benefit of the entire region, so that countries need not depend on only one country. Like today, there is very excessive dependence on China for many countries in our region, in the Indo-Pacific region. Quad, if it helps in allowing this reduction in dependence on only one country and allowing other countries also as an option for countries in the region, that will be good for all the countries in the region.
Yeah, absolutely. So now if we can just look at your relationship with the West, you obviously mentioned the US there. Under President Trump, you did forge close relations, close ties with the conservatives there in the US. Do you see the US as a natural ally to India and the BJP?
Let me correct you. Our close ties with America have not started with President Trump. In fact, the word you used, natural allies, was first coined by Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 2001, when he had a meeting with President George Bush, who became the President of America at that time. So we have had strong bilateral ties between our two countries. You are right. We consider ourselves as natural allies. We have a strong people-to-people bond also. I mean, I don't have to tell you how much India is valued in your country, in your households. You have many Indians as your partners, your people in the country. So it's a very strong between these two countries. On a lighter side, we have had, like many other countries in the world, we also had very tough time under President Trump with respect to tariffs, with respect to other things. So, but this relationship is beyond leaders, beyond parties. There is a bipartisan consensus, both in India as well as in the US, that it's a natural relationship. It has to only grow from strength to strength.
And just in terms of Biden, clearly he's now taken over. How will that affect your relationship with the US?
I really don't think there will be any major change or upheaval in this relationship, because, as I mentioned, there is a bipartisan consensus when it comes to the efficacy, the utility of this relationship. We are very natural friends. We are biggest democracies, oldest democracy, and the biggest democracy in the world. That brings us together. We have a strong people-to-people bond. Our interests in the most happening region also are the same. We share a lot of common interests. So I really don't see anything changing in any big way. But each government is different. I mean, as I said, many people had this perception that probably under President Trump, Modi and Trump were very close. Of course, Modi is friends with many world leaders, but we had our problems with President Trump's regime. There could be some issues with the President Biden regime also, but that won't affect the long-term relationship of our two countries. They are natural allies. As I said, this relationship will grow from strength to strength only.
Well, saying that, clearly many media outlets in the US have been very critical of the BJP. The New York Times, Washington Post, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, Foreign Policy, many others I could name. They seem to be saying that Modi is a threat to Indian democracy. So there is some strain there in that relationship, clearly, with the US.
Either they are misinformed because of certain propaganda that happens from various interested sections, or probably they have misunderstood the reality on the ground here. I will just give you one information about the latest Freedom House report. The Freedom House report categorically states that India's electoral system is flawless. It categorically says that India's political system, that includes political parties and their functioning, is completely free. It gives 4 out of 4 grades to these systems. Then how can anyone say that Indian democracy is in danger? There are certain issues raised with respect to the civic rights of certain individual cases. There is a misunderstanding about government's position, which we will explain to the people who have doubts about it. But India's democracy, India's electoral system, India's political establishment is very vibrant. It's a successful democracy. We have lost a number of elections in the last 3 years. So it shows that Indian democracy is vibrant. There is absolutely no threat to freedom or democracy in India.
Well, one last question perhaps about democracy. I know that time is running out now. The Hindu, which is the leading Indian newspaper, has called your new digital media laws a wolf in watchdog's clothing. So are you turning against freedom of speech and internet freedom?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, these new proposed new legislation for regulating the social media platforms is essentially about asking the platforms themselves to self-regulate. It's not about government controlling or regulating them. We're asking the platforms themselves to self-regulate. Like, for example, if it is a mainstream media organization, you mentioned about the paper, The Hindu. The Hindu has its own regulatory mechanism. They have editors. They have people, ombudsman. Then there is a press council. There is a regulatory mechanism for mainstream media, which doesn't exist for social media platforms. So we are not going after individual social media handles. We are only asking the social media platforms to have self-regulation mechanism and be answerable to government as and when required. It's not against any individual user. It's only certain regulatory mechanism to be developed by themselves, by the platforms, social media platforms, whether it is Twitter or it is Facebook or any other social media platform. They have to develop certain self-regulatory mechanism. That's all that government is asking them to do.
Okay, one last reflection. I did say that was the last one, but one last one. This is a question from Mudit Jain, who's been watching. He says, does India need its own Silicon Valley? What's your vision for that?
Which one is the Silicon Valley?
Does India need its own Silicon Valley?
Yeah, I mean, Silicon Valley per se as an area, I don't want to say anything about that, but yes, a major technological upgradation is very much the need of the hour for India. Remember, India has enormous pool of human resources when it comes to deep tech areas, high technology like artificial intelligence areas. In all these areas, we have enormous pool of human resources available. But in India, what we lack is the availability of technology platforms. That is where probably we need support from Silicon Valley also. They should come here, invest in India to develop research and development of deep tech applications here in areas like artificial intelligence, big data, in all these new frontier areas. India is very keen on these areas. Prime Minister is repeatedly emphasizing on innovation. Innovation, not at the secondary or tertiary level, but innovation at the deep tech level is the need of the hour for India. We are definitely lagging behind in that, but the problem is we need companies from Silicon Valley where such kind of technologies are available to come to India and exploit the human resource potential of India.
Okay, Madhav, thank you so much for your time and for those interesting thoughts and for answering all these questions that certainly our viewers and editorial team have put together for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, fabulous. And let me just say to those of you who are watching that FO Talks is brought to you by Fair Observer, which is a platform for citizen journalism, which has 2,500 contributors from 90 different countries. And we would love you to continue the conversation. So you can sign up for our newsletter, you can subscribe to our channel, and you can follow us on social media. You can, of course, publish your articles with us. And Mr. Madhav, if you ever have time to publish another essay, then do think of us. So please do join us and become a Fair Observer.